Samuel, the 16th chapter, I shall read verses 1 through 13. 1 Samuel, the 16th chapter, verses 1 through 13. And the Lord said unto Samuel, How long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill thine horn with oil, and go, I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons. And Samuel said, How can I go? If Saul hear it, he will kill me. And the Lord said, Take an heifer with thee, and say, I am come to sacrifice to the Lord. And call Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will shew thee what thou shalt do. And thou shalt anoint unto me him whom I name unto thee. And Samuel did that which the Lord spake, and came to Bethlehem. And the elders of the town trembled at his coming, and said, Comest thou peaceably? And he said, Peaceably. I am come to sacrifice unto the Lord. Sanctify yourselves, and come with me to the sacrifice. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons, and called them to the sacrifice. And it came to pass, when they were come, that he looked on Eliab, and said, Surely the Lord's anointed is before him. But the Lord said unto Samuel, Look not on his countenance, or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Then Jesse called Abinadab, and made him pass before Samuel. And he said, Neither hath the Lord chosen this. Then Jesse made Shammah to pass by, and he said, Neither hath the Lord chosen this. Again, Jesse made 7 of his sons to pass before Samuel. And Samuel said unto Jesse, The Lord hath not chosen these. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Are here all thy children? And he said, There remaineth yet the youngest. And behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither. And he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and withal of a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, Arise, anoint him, for this is he. Then Samuel took the horn of oil, and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. I want to talk for a few minutes from the subject. What God has for you, it is for you. What God has for you, it is for you. Amen. At the time of the text, Saul, king of Israel, has been rejected by God as Israel's king. Saul had been disobedient, refused to do what God said. So God was displeased with Saul, and through the prophet Samuel, Saul was told by the Lord that I've rejected you from reigning over Israel. Well, the Bible tells us that Samuel was rather upset and disappointed over Saul's conduct. And so the Lord spoke to Samuel and said, How long are you going to mourn over Saul, seeing that I've rejected him? Samuel, how long are you going to have a pity party over a man that I'm tired of his sinful ways? Samuel, how long you going to be down in the dumps with the blues because I've rejected Saul? Samuel, I want you to fill your flask or your horn with oil and go down to Bethlehem. And I found me a king among the sons of Jesse. Samuel, I want you to get up and quit mourning. Get a hold of yourself and do what I want you to do. And might be that somebody here, you've been down in the dumps too long. you've been having your own little pity party. You've experienced some disappointments, some discouragement. Things have not gone the way you anticipated. And consequently, it's beginning to take its toll on your life. I come to tell you this morning, it's time to get up. Feel your home. Are you listening to me? Encourage yourself. Look up to God and know that God is not through with you yet. God is not through pouring out blessings. God still got a plan. He's got a purpose for your life. God told him, say, you get up and go down to Bethlehem, and I'm going to provide a king among the sons of Jesse. Oh, the Bible says that Samuel said, well, Lord, if Saul know that I'm going there to anoint the next king, he going to kill me. Lord said, take a heifer with you and go down there and have a sacrifice. You go down there and worship me. And don't worry about Saul. I'll take care of Saul. And listen, whenever you do what God said do, he'll take care of all the other details. And so he got him a heifer and went down to Bethlehem. And the elders were somewhat disturbed when Samuel came. And they said, is everything all right? He said, everything's all right. I come to offer up a sacrifice to the Lord. He said, all right. So he said, y'all come on, let's worship the Lord. And he sent for Jesse and his sons. And Jesse and his sons came and he sanctified them. And he told Jesse, said, Jesse, the Lord has picked one of your sons to be the next king. And when Samuel looked at Jesse's oldest boy, he said, that's got to be the one, because he stands like a king. He looks like he's kingly material, and he's strong looking like a king. But the Lord spoke to Samuel and said, no, I've rejected him. Said, Samuel, you're making a mistake here. Man looks at what's on the outside, but God looks at the heart. Man looks at what's on the skin. I look beneath the skin. He said, I rejected him. And the record said that Jesse brought another one of his sons, Shema, Benadab, up and had 7 boys to pass before Samuel. And God said, I rejected all of these. Ain't the one. And so Jesse said, you mean none of these? He said, no, Jesse, the Lord ain't picked now one of these. Oh, y'all listen to me. And he said, now all your sons here. He said, well, my youngest boy is out there in the field tending the sheep. And he said, well, you need to get him in here. He said, we're not going to stop until he comes in. And when he brought his youngest son in, the Lord said, that's the one. David is his name. This is the first time we see David in Scripture. And when we meet him, we see him anointed as Israel's next king. Now, what I want you to see this morning is that what God had for David was for David. And listen, God passed up his brothers, and God gave David the king. Because what God had for him, it was for him. And that's what I want to tell y'all. What God has for you is for you. And listen, I don't care what you've been through. I don't care what other folk think about you. I don't care what color your skin may be. What God has for you is for you. Regardless of your age, your financial status, whether you're rich or poor, makes no difference. What God has for you, it is for you. I wish I had some praying folk this morning. I don't care whether you're single, married, separated, divorced, widowed. What God has for you, it is for you. Whether you're educated or uneducated, what God has for you is for you. You may not have everything you want or desire, but God still has something just for you. Yes, and what God has for you, you don't have to steal to get it. You don't have to lie to get it. You don't have to politic to get it. You don't have to backstab anybody to get it. You don't have to sell dope to get it. You have to shoot nobody to get it. You don't have to complain to get it. You don't have to dig no ditches for anybody to get it. You don't have to be underhanded, two-faced to get it. What God has for you, it is for you. Now, this text lets me know that you got to be careful about getting in a rush to get your blessing, because you got to wait for God's time. Are you listening to me? That's really what happened to Israel. That's how they ended up with a Saul. See, they were in a rush to get a king. God was raising them up a king. But because they were in a rush, God gave them a Saul. And Saul proved to be bad for the kingdom. And listen, if you just wait on God, God knows who he has for you. I want to encourage the single folk in here. Wait on God. What God has for you, or who he has for you, is for you. You ain't got to worry about nobody taking what God's got for you. Are y'all listening to me? If just wait on God, trust in God. What's for you is for you. Oh, the record says Jesse and his boys came to the sacrifice. His sons were passed up with the exception of one. Yes, God passed up all the other 7 boys. But when he got to David, God said to Samuel, that's the one. I'm almost through. But the question is, why did God pass up the other 7 and pick David? Why did God look past Eliab, who was the firstborn, and all these other boys, and have Samuel to anoint David? It comes down to one thing. David's heart was right with God. When you read in Acts 13 and 22, the Bible describes David as a man after God's own heart. David's heart was right with God. And listen, God wants some folk whose heart is right with him. Are you listening to me? I don't care how good looking you are, how well dressed you are, how popular you are, how many people pat you on your back. God is looking at your heart. And the heart got to be right. Saul had a heart for government, but David had a heart for God. Are y'all listening to me? David was picked. He was God's choice. Nobody recommended David to God. It was God who made the sovereign choice of David. Nobody even mentioned David's name by way of recommendation. It was God all by himself who had chosen David. God picks who everybody else overlooks. God picks who everybody else leave in the background. Are y'all listening to me? Yes, God, this choice of David was sovereign. It was done by God alone. Had been left up to Samuel, it would have been Eliab. Eliab proved to be a jealous fella. He was a grouchy fella. Are y'all listening to me? Eliab was not the right person. Neither were his other brothers the right persons. But David had a heart for God. Are y'all listening to me? And it's important that we look for evidence of a person's heart. Yes. When you're looking for a mate, don't get caught up in how they look. Looks sometimes can be deceiving. Are y'all listening to me? And somebody in here know what I'm talking about because you've been there, done that. Are you listening to me? Perhaps you got somebody right now that you wish you had left alone. But you went by how they look. You ain't got to say amen. Looks can sometimes be deceiving. Am I right about it? Yes, there's some who bought a car that looked good, but it turned out to be a lemon. Looks can sometimes be deceiving. Yes. So God shocked everybody. He picked the one that had been left out. He picked the one who was last called in. Wonder why didn't Mr. Jesse call in David in the first place? He called in all the other boys. Why didn't he have David in the number in the first place? You know, sometimes family members can show favoritism toward others and leave you in the background. You know what I'm saying? And so when we are introduced to David in Scripture, notice how we are introduced to him in the words of his father. Look at verse 11, how he introduces his baby boy. He said, there remaineth yet the youngest, and he's out there keeping the sheep. We are not even introduced to him by his name. He said, oh, my youngest, he's out there in the field. It's obvious here that he didn't think of David what he thought of the other boys. And what I'm trying to get you to see here is that God picks the very folk that other folk overlook, that other folk discriminate against, other folk push in the background. You ought to be careful how you treat folk because that person might be over you one day. Jesse had no idea that the very son he left out in the field would one day be his king. Be careful how you treat folk. You don't know who you're going to have to bow down to. You don't know whose head going to have to feed you. Be careful how you treat folk. Well, why? What was it about David that caused his heart to be right? Well, David had accepted God as the center of his life. David looked to God as the head of his life. David worshiped and served God. He trusted and obeyed God. God made David the next king. First of all, because David was ready. Look at the text. When Jesse and the other boys were called to the sacrifice, Samuel had to sanctify them. But notice, when David showed up, all he did was anoint him. Jesse and his boys had to get right. David was already right. Are y'all listening to me? And we need folk in positions whose hearts are already right. Amen. We need folk leading songs whose heart is right. Are y'all listening to me? We need people who are leading auxiliaries whose heart is right. We need pastors of churches whose hearts are right. We need deacons whose hearts are right. Amen. It was ready. He didn't wait. They didn't have to do anything. David, he was already right. The others had to be sanctified. They had to get right. But when David came in, he was already right. And listen, you ought not wait till every Sunday morning comes to get right with God. You ought not wait till you get to church to try to get right. You ought to get right before you get here. Amen. And I think a lot of times the reason why we can't really worship God like we ought to, because we ain't right. Heart's not right. Some of us still got the New Year's hangover. Still got the New Year's party in your system. How you gonna be filled with the Spirit when you still got some liquor in your system? God wants your heart to be right. Heart got to be right. And I'm not just talking about just on the weekend, not just on a Sunday morning, but every day. Are you listening to me? The heart's got to be right with God. He was ready. David was living a holy life. But not only was he ready, but the text lets me know his heart was right because he was reliable. Listen to what his daddy said. He's out there tending to the sheep. David was reliable. He knew he could count on David. Are y'all listening to me? And if you want God to use you, you got to be reliable. God wants somebody he can count on. Are y'all listening to me? Ought to be responsible enough. If you're not going to be here to sing on Sunday, tell somebody. If you're not going to be able to be here to usher, tell somebody. Be responsible. If you're not going to be here to teach your class, tell somebody. Be responsible. If your name is on program and you're not going to be there, tell somebody ahead of time. Don't wait until 1 minute before the time and call somebody. You need to let them know ahead of time. Be reliable. One of the biggest mistakes we can make in our churches is put people in positions of responsibility who are not dependable, who are not reliable. Are you listening to me? David could be trusted. You could count on David. David could be trusted when the going got tough. He was not the kind who would run from a problem. God wants somebody whose heart is right, who when a problem come up, you will stick in there, dig in and pray and know that God gonna get you through that thing. Are you listening to me? David was reliable. He was faithful. God wants folk who are faithful. After all, Jesus said, when it's all over, when time comes to stand before God, for all of us, he will welcome in. He will say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. God is calling for faithfulness. He wants us to be faithful. Are you listening to me? And in order to be faithful, you got to have faith. Am I right about it? David had faith in God. In the next chapter, when he stood before the Philistine named Goliath, David expressed and demonstrated his faith in God. Oh, my brothers and my sisters, throughout the remainder of his life, David proved to be a king who had a heart for God. And so God, my brothers and my sisters, is looking for somebody he can count on. Somebody he can depend on. So don't take what you do lightly. Don't take it for granted. Because if you be faithful, God has a way of rewarding you in ways that you never imagined. Don't take going to your job every day for granted. You go and be faithful under God. Remember, you're not just working for your employer, but as a child of God, you're representing God. Are you listening to me? God will reward faithfulness. But finally, not only was David ready, not only was he reliable, but the text lets me know David was redeemed. Notice when the oil flowed upon his head, the Bible said the Spirit of the Lord came upon him from that day forward. And my brothers and my sisters, David was already a child of God. Am I right about it? Oh, if you want your heart to be right, you got to become a child of God. Am I right about it? If you want your heart to be right, you got to let Jesus in your heart. Am I right about it? You must be willing to give your heart to the Lord. Yeah, well, the Bible says that Samuel anointed him in the presence of his brothers. Now, as I close here, I couldn't help but notice that his brothers were standing there looking at him. And some of them didn't like the fact that David was anointed. Yes, but what I love about it is even when folk around you are not in favor of it, yes, what God has for you is still for you. Am I right about it? Don't expect everybody to be happy for you when God begins to bless you. Don't expect everybody to be in your corner when the Lord has blessed you. Yes, but you rejoice knowing that it was nobody but the Lord who brought this in my life. Thank God, all right. Anybody here know, yes, God can bless you in spite of your haters. Thank God, all right. God can bless you in spite of those who are envious of you. Yes, God can bless you even when there are those around you who don't like you. Ain't God all right? And so the Bible says God blessed David in the midst of his brethren. Ain't God all right? So I'm glad to know what God has for you and what God has for me. It is for me. Ain't God all right? As I read through the Bible, there are many people, God has certain things just for them. Yes, it was for Moses to lead Israel out of the land of Egypt. Am I right about it? It was for Abraham to be the father of many nations. Yes, it was for Joshua to lead Israel into the promised land. Yes, it was for Ruth to tell Naomi, entreat me not to leave you. Wherever you go, I'll go. Wherever you lodge, I'll lodge. Your people will be my people, and you, God, will be my God. Thank God, all right. It was for Isaiah to tell us they that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. Ain't God all right? It was for the Hebrew boys to survive a fiery furnace, and when they came out, you couldn't tell what they had been through. Thank God, all right. It was for John the Baptist to be the forerunner of Jesus Christ. Am I right about it? But it was for Jesus to come into this sin-sick world, to go to a place called Calvary, to die for our sins, buried in a borrowed tomb, but early Sunday morning to rise again. Ain't God all right? And so my brothers and my sisters, I thank God for what he has for you. And I thank God for what he has for me. Yes, his mercy is for me. Salvation is for me. Ain't God all right? You ought to tell yourself and tell somebody that his joy is for me. His peace is for me. His love is for me. His forgiveness is for me. His grace is for me. Ain't God all right? His loving kindness is for me. His Holy Spirit, it is for me. I thank God today for what God has for me. Yeah, and I come to know a long time ago, yes, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it. The world can't take it. Ain't God all right? Anybody here got a reason to give God praise? Anybody here ever thank God for what he's given you? Anybody here ever give him glory for what he has for you? Anybody here know God is not through blessing you? Yeah, ain't he all right? Yeah, oh yeah. What God has for you, it is for you. I want to extend the invitation and invite you to come to the Lord Jesus Christ. If you are a sinner, salvation is for you through Jesus Christ. If you are a backslider, God's forgiveness is for you. I invite you to come. Come by letter, by Christian experience, come as a candidate for baptism, come for rededication, come for special prayer. Whosoever will, I invite you to come. What God has for me, it is for me. Come today. What God has for me, it is for me. Come today. I know without a doubt he will surely bring me out. What God has for me, it is for me. Come today. What God has for me, it is for me. What God has for me, it is for me. Come today. I know without a doubt he will surely bring me out. What God has for me, it is for me. Let me say it again. What God has for me, it is for me. Thank you, Lord. What God has for me, it is for me. Come today. I know without a doubt he will surely bring me out. What God has for me, it is for me. Come today. It is for me. It is for me. Thank you, Jesus. What God has for me, it is for me. Oh yes, I know without a doubt he will surely bring me out. What God has for me, it is for me. Come today. It is for me. It is for me. Come today, come to Jesus Christ. What God has for me, it is for me. I know without a doubt he will surely bring me out. I know without a doubt he will surely bring me out. I know without a doubt he will surely bring me out. I know no matter how dark it is, the Lord will surely bring me out. Oh, I know without a doubt he will surely bring. When it even look like I can't come out, I know without a doubt he will surely bring me out. No matter what the doctor say, I know without a doubt the Lord will surely bring. Oh, I know without a doubt he will surely bring. Oh, I know. Come today, he will surely. You gotta trust and believe. Oh, I know he will surely. Thank you, Jesus. I know without a doubt he will surely bring me out. What God has for me, it is for me. Oh, yeah. What God has for me, it is for me. Oh, Lord. What God, it is for me. Yes. Oh, yes. What God. You ought to live so that you can get what God has for you. What God, it is for me. Thank you, Jesus. What God has, it is for me. Oh, what God has for me, it is for me.